A second Qantas plane has made an emergency landing in Singapore after experiencing engine problems.
Shortly after takeoff, the Sydney-bound Boeing 747-400 experienced trouble with one of its engines and was forced to return to Changi Airport. Flight QF6 landed safely and without incident, with no injuries reported among the 412 passengers or 19 crew. Passengers say they heard a banging noise and saw smoke and flames emerging from one of the engines.
Nobody would have been more relieved than Qantas executives to see this flight arrive without incident. John Travolta piloted his 707 in from Florida for the airline's 90th anniversary, while more than 400 Qantas passengers, who should have also been in Sydney, were stranded in Singapore.
Engine caught fire, and I was sitting next to the window, so I actually saw the engine in fire. It was quite scary,
There was some engine trouble and deja vu. I guess it was just like yesterday, less severe.
It was an unwanted case of deja vu for the airline's chief.
Last night on Qantas Flight 6 from Singapore to Sydney, the pilot experienced 6 minutes into flight a problem with the number one engine. The pilot shut down the engine. The engine did produce smoke and sparks.
The aircraft, a Boeing 747-400, is grounded in Singapore, whilst its engines are manufactured by Rolls-Royce, which also makes the Trent 900 model that failed on the A380 a day earlier. Qantas says the incidents are unrelated. Its most famous pilot is confident the airline will get through this rough patch.
While the 707 is unquestionably one of the most reliable passenger aircraft of all time, the same can't be said of Qantas's modern fleet. Minutes after the Hollywood star spoke to the media in front of this A380 Airbus, engineers began feverishly working on its Trent 900 engines. As with the A380, Qantas is standing by its line that the policy of conducting some maintenance offshore did not contribute to this latest failure.
This engine and this aircraft are maintained in Australia. The 747 is maintained here in Australia, in Avalon, and the engine last maintenance took place here in Sydney.
The Qantas 747 passengers left Singapore on a replacement aircraft a few hours ago, while most of the A380 passengers involved in Thursday's mid-air drama landed safely in Sydney last night. Marcus Rubenstein.
The engine trouble struck just a day and a half after a Qantas Airbus A380, also bound for Sydney, was forced to turn back. In that case, amateur footage revealed a hole torn in the wing by parts from one of the aircraft's 4 engines. The pilot won praise for his efforts to keep the passengers calm. Now, another plane load of people has been forced to confront their worst fears. But again, they've commended the pilot on keeping them calm despite the obvious dangers.
No big deal. It just blew the motor, that's all. Actually, fire came out of the motor and returned back, and that's it.
Nobody panicked. The only thing we could hear was the flight crew shouting, doing the position but that's
Basically, at takeoff, Qantas Flight 6 flew up, and at some point one of the cabin crew told us to heads down and brace ourselves, and very effective communication, everyone did. Short time thereafter, it appeared that there was something wrong with the engine, and the engine was shut down. Then after that, we jettisoned fuel over a 40-minute period before returning and landing at Singapore Airport.
A Qantas spokeswoman couldn't say whether this plane was carrying passengers or crew who were on board the earlier ill-fated Airbus flight.
With questions already raised about how Qantas manages its aircraft, this is surely the last thing the company needed.
Qantas has again been forced to defend its maintenance standards after a second mid-air engine failure in as many days. 400 passengers were left stranded in Singapore after the 747-400 was forced to turn back en route to Sydney. It's another blow for the airline just 2 days after it grounded its A380 fleet over another engine blowout.
For 90 years, the Flying Kangaroo has been a symbol of Australian aviation. But instead of celebrating, Qantas is facing a PR nightmare after 2 mid-air emergencies in as many days. The latest, a terrifying engine failure on a Boeing 747-400.
Engine number 1 had to shut down. What occurred was that the pilot recognised that there was a problem, 2,000 feet. He shut down the engine, asked for priority clearance and returned to the airport.
Some of the 412 passengers say they heard a loud bang and saw smoke and flames coming from one of the engines.
As we were taking off, we climbed to about 6,000 metres and then there was a small bang.
Deja vu, I guess it was just like yesterday, less severe.
It's not dissimilar to Thursday's incident on an Airbus A380, but Qantas says the two are in no way related.
They're unrelated, they're different engines while they're the same manufacturer, so these issues are unrelated.
Passengers from that flight began arriving in Sydney last night.
Sorry about the attention. Look at you.
Despite their ordeal, passengers were full of praise for their captain and crew.
Oh, the Qantas staff are brilliant. They are brilliant people. They're just wonderful people.
Qantas handled the job very well. You know, it was an explosion.
So I'd just like to thank their staff on board. They were just absolutely, just kept you up to date with what was happening all the time.
Qantas has dismissed claims overseas maintenance is to blame for the incidents.
This recent aircraft, the 747, the incident last night, it was actually maintained in Avalon in Australia. Qantas has 85% of our maintenance. In fact, last year, 92% of our maintenance was done onshore in Australia. We've got 5,500 engineers. They're very well trained.
Experts too are quick to point out the airline's generally impeccable record.
They've got a phenomenal safety record with jet operations under the Qantas name, not a single fatality, and that they are the envy, really, of most airlines.
The Qantas brand around the world is very strong, and so strong that, you know, although I'm friends with Oprah, she dedicated a whole show to the airline, and I was a good part of that, being the ambassador, but that's the quality of the brand, is that strong.
Travolta is a fully qualified Qantas pilot with more than 7,000 hours flying time, much of it on an aircraft that's half a century old.
The Air Transport Safety Bureau will look into both incidents.
With a major investigation, it can take up to 12 months, which sounds like a long time. But if there's any important safety information that needs to come out earlier, that needs to be promulgated, that's done straight away.